Today, as I mentioned, we're wrapping up our final message of this Unshakable series. And really, it's been, I think, for a lot of people, very powerful. It's been enlightening. It's been encouraging for some of you based off of the circumstances you've been in, the situations that you found yourself in. And so it's really, honestly, been a great series. But I've got to confess and share with you that we've probably been a little dishonest during the course of this series, particularly in the messages. Maybe not dishonest as much as we've been a little or slightly misleading, because we've talked a lot about, right, how you can be unshakable, which is about getting back up. And then we talked about how you can be assured and how, you could move forward, have confidence to take another step. And then last week, I shared with you about what being at peace or deeply at peace, what that looks like. And these are all things that Jesus said, and these are all things that Jesus spoke, and things that the words that Jesus offered right before he was going to be crucified. So it's not that those things are untrue. It's just that we've talked a lot about those things, and we've not really kind of made it a point of emphasis on the piece or the thing that kind of holds all of this together. We've not really spent a lot of time talking about the thing that kind of allows or makes it possible for this to be the case, for you to become unshakable, for you to be assured, for you to be deeply at peace. And I guess we've just not really acknowledged that. And so there's kind of this piece, because Jesus said these things. In fact, just look at what he spoke in John 16:33. These are Jesus' words, right? He says, "I've told you all this so that trusting me, you will be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace," right? So it's all there. It's not like we've lied and just made something up or fabricated something. This is what Jesus said, but there's a caveat. There's kind of a catch, if you will. And it's, yes, you can be unshakable. Yes, you can be assured. Yes, you can be deeply at peace. But it's required, but what comes first is that you trust me. And so I think it's easy to look at a scripture like this. I think it's easy to look at a verse like this, and it's easy to kind of navigate a series like this and talk about being unshakable, and talk about being assured, and talk about being at peace, and skip over this one piece that's critical. It's the glue, it's the keystone to all of those other things taking place. You see, because to be unshakable and to be assured and to be deeply at peace, those are all things that I would think that we would all agree upon and say, yes, that's what I want. I want to be unshakable. I want to feel assured. I want to be deeply at peace when life is spinning out of control. Those are all things that we want, but what we don't always gather or recognize is that these things are fruits of something else. And they're fruits of something that comes by way of trusting. In fact, when Jesus spoke this, in a sense, these were his terms and conditions, if you will. That if you want to be unshakable, if you want to be assured, and if you want to be deeply at peace, the terms of the agreement, the terms and the conditions that apply to those things are that you trust me. And it begins there. And I think that's one of the things that is really kind of easy to gloss over, because we can look to the end of this scripture and we can look to the end of these words and say, yeah, that stands out, that speaks to me, that resonates, but we gloss over or miss the key to it all. And in reality, this is no different than what Jesus was already speaking or what he was already sharing with his friends. This is what he was already communicating to his disciples in the same conversation. He was just reiterating it, rephrasing it, and reminding them of what the key to all of this was. Because Jesus, as he spoke about this, I guess, what he wanted them to know is that this matters. You being unshakable and you being assured matters, and you being deeply at peace matters. But don't miss the key to it all. And the reason why this matters is because, look, if we say we want to be unshakable, what does it imply? It implies that times or life are going to be kind of unsteady, right? It implies or suggests that things are going to be difficult, that things aren't going to go the way we anticipated, that times of life are going to feel frustrating or discouraging, or cause us to question or make us wonder if we have hope, or make us wonder if we're on the right path, or make us wonder if we did the right thing. So if you say, I want to be unshakable, what you're signing up for is things aren't going to go right. Right? It's easy to say, I'm unshakable when life is good, the paychecks are coming, your bank account looks nice, your friends and family, your relationships are all good, your family is healthy, and you like them all. It's easy to be unshakable in those circumstances. But flip the script. It's a lot different. It's a whole nother thing when the bank account doesn't look so pretty, when the paychecks aren't coming, when the relationships aren't thriving, when the illness hits, when the fear and the depression and the anxiety overwhelms you. That's the only way of truly knowing that you are unshakable. You can say, I'm unshakable, but until things start to shake, you don't really know if you're unshakable. And so when Jesus said, I want you to be unshakable, what Jesus was suggesting, what Jesus was kind of acknowledging is that there are going to be times when the ground beneath you is not steady. And if you want to be this type of person, if you want to attain this type of status, if you want to reach this kind of level, then it's going to require that you trust me. It's going to require that you go. Because listen, here's the thing I've learned about Jesus. And all these years of following Jesus, what I've learned is that Jesus is okay letting me walk through unsteady times. He's 100% okay with it. Jesus is 100% good with letting things in my life fall apart. Jesus is 100% okay with letting things feel uneasy or uncomfortable or difficult or stressful or fearful or worrisome. In fact, what I've realized is that most of the time it doesn't even seem like he's trying to protect me from it. He's just kind of letting me wade into the deep end and say, okay, there you go. But he didn't say he would leave me. He said he would be there with me. The promise isn't that he would protect me from it all. The promise is that he would go through it all. And so that's where trust matters. Because in the deep end, in the unsteadiness, in the uncertainty, in the fear, in the depression, in the worry, in the anxiety, in the stress, in the hurt, in the pain, is when I need to know that someone else is there with me. Because if Jesus said he was going to be with me, I need to know it, I need to feel it, because that's going to be the key to helping me get through it or helping me withstand it. And again, this is what Jesus was speaking about just moments prior in his conversation with the disciples. Look at what John 15 says. John 15, starting in verse 1, it's the same conversation just moments before the verse we just quoted. Jesus said this, I'm the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. Verse 4, he says this, remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you're the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing. What Jesus is saying is that, listen, what you saw, unshakable, what you heard, assured, what you witnessed, at peace, those are fruits of something. Those are effects, but I'm the cause. And if you want the effects, then it requires that you got to be plugged in or tied into the cause. Now, I've asked Eric, my lovely assistant, to bring up something because I want to help visualize this for you. So everyone give Eric a round of applause. Appreciate it, Eric. Because I want to illustrate this to you, because when we think of a vine, you know, if you live on the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side, then what you're thinking of is some sort of like nice brownstone with like a plant growing up the side of it. But that's not what Jesus was talking about. He did not envision brownstones on the Upper West Side or on the Upper East Side. He was talking about a grapevine. Okay, and so I want to draw this for you. I chose green, see, to help it kind of feel like more authentic, right? And so here's, you might think this looks funny, but here's kind of what this looks like, okay? So you have the ground, obviously, and then you have a stalk or the root, but a grapevine typically grows kind of like this. In fact, a little bit flat across the top. And when Jesus was talking about being unshakable, he was talking about the fruit of unshakable. When he was talking about being assured, he was talking about the fruit of being assured. When he was talking about being at peace, he was talking about the fruit of being at peace. And just like a vine grows and produces fruit, a life with Jesus grows and produces these types of things. And these types of things are what Jesus was referring to when he said, this is who I want you to be. This is where I want you to go. And this is what I want you to become. But apart from me, if you're not planted or if you're not kind of connected to this vine, you cannot produce these types of things in your life. You wonder, well, where's Jesus at? I thought he promised me peace. And Jesus is like, I've been in the same spot all along. You've just not abided in me. You've just not remained in me. I thought I would be unshakable. I thought I could go through anything and withstand whatever trials or challenges that are in my life. And Jesus said, yes, but it requires that you remain in me. Because I'm the vine, you're the branches. And the fruit of that you're looking for isn't just something that kind of populates or appears on its own or apart from me. These are the things that Jesus offered. These are the things that Jesus spoke of. And I think one of the things that we kind of done in this series intentionally is discuss these things, because it's easy to kind of dangle a carrot and say, yep, I want that. And then come back and say, okay, well, if that's what you want, this is what it's going to take. Because if we said this is what it's going to take, you say, well, I'm good. I don't need that. But if you say this is the fruit that I want in my life, I want to be known as a person, though, no matter what I go through, no matter what circumstances I face, no matter what uphill battles before me, I'm going to be steadfast. I'm going to be unshakable. I'm going to be confident and assured. And I'm going to have peace even when everything around me is spinning out of control. Jesus said, this is what it looks like, and this is what it takes. And here's what I want. Here's what Crystal wants for each and every person. We want you to be unshakable. We want you to be assured. We want you to be deeply at peace. We want to raise a community of people who feel confident in who Jesus is, what he's doing in their lives, and where he'll go with them, no matter what's happening around them. We desire this for you, and we want you to experience this in your life, but these are the things that it's going to take. And so what I want to do is actually just kind of use the vine or the process of growing a vine as a metaphor for the process of growing trust, because Jesus said the key is trusting me. And trust is an interesting thing because we all know what it is, but we don't know how to get it necessarily. At times, it's difficult to define. We know how to lose it, and we know when it's been lost, but we don't always understand what it takes to develop a relationship with trust, particularly when we're talking about a faith in Jesus Christ. And so I want to begin with this kind of idea of being planted. You've got to be planted. Just as a vine originates with a seed that is planted in the ground, a relationship with Jesus begins with a seed of faith that is planted in him. You see, you can't trust Jesus if you don't know Jesus. And what I mean by that is an active decision to say, yes, I am giving my life to Jesus. Yes, I am trusting in him. I am taking what I don't know. I'm taking what I don't understand, surrendering it, or taking my questions and yielding it and saying, Jesus, this is the way that I believe I'm going to experience this assuredness. And this is the way I'm going to experience to be unshakable. This is the way I'm going to experience and find peace. And so I'm going to plant this seed of faith and say, Jesus, I don't know all the details, but I somewhat believe or I recognize that my life is better with you than it is apart from you. And so I will recognize my frailty. I will recognize my fallenness, my humanity, and my inability to perfect things or lead things or do things on my own, and trust in the fact that you died on a cross for my sins, for my wrong, but you lived a perfect life so that I didn't have to, but I could simply just trust in you. And it begins when you are planted. It begins when you make that decision to say, this is what I'm giving my life to. This is what I'm surrendering to. I'm recognizing that Jesus is God, that he is good, and that he is Lord over all. And trust begins in this moment. It doesn't need all the details. It doesn't need everything resolved. It just needs that decision of surrender where you say, you know what? I can give this seed to this person because he's going to grow it into something that I cannot. And so I will give my life to Jesus and begin this relationship of trust by being planted in him. But it moves from being planted to being rooted, because just like a vine grows and shoots, the first thing the seed does is sprout underground. And a life in Jesus has to be rooted. A life in Jesus, a seed doesn't just stay a seed, it grows. And a life in Jesus doesn't just end, or trusting Jesus doesn't just end or climax in being planted. It develops itself out into roots, into kind of this integration between your life and his way, where all of a sudden the ways of Jesus and who he is, what he desires, and what he says about you become congruent with who you are, the way you live, and the way you behave. This is about being kind of taking that next step and saying it's no longer just a decision, but now it's a commitment. Now it's about kind of diving in. Now it's about expanding. Now it's about going beyond what that one-time thing was or what that one experience was. And what I mean by this is not just like, okay, I'm going to church every week or I'm experiencing a church service every week. It's about digging in to say, who is Jesus? What does he want for my life? How do I begin discovering that? How do I begin pursuing that? Where do I take that and kind of expand it beyond what I know on the surface and develop it so that it's actually something strong? Because a tree or a root or a vine cannot stand if it's not rooted. In fact, a vine with no roots is no vine at all. It's just a sad case of what could have been. And I think there's a lot of people who have at one point or another made a decision to believe in Jesus, and they've planted that seed, if you will, but they've not rooted themselves into the ways of Jesus, into the heart of Jesus. And just like a vine without roots is a sad case of what could have been, a person, a believer without roots in Jesus is also a sad case of what could have been. Because we believe that Jesus has more for you. We believe that Jesus wants to take you beyond where you're at, beyond where you've been, and help you experience the grandness of all that he intended because he sees you as his. And there's so much more for you in terms of potential. There's so much more for you in terms of opportunity. There's so much more for you in terms of faith. There's so much more for you in terms of this life. And it's a shame if you would just leave it at a seed instead of saying, you know what, it's time to be rooted. It's time to take it a step further. It's time to expand my horizons and live into what Jesus wants.
That's good, Rick.
And so it's got to be rooted. It's got to expand. It's got to dig deep because this serves as the foundation for the strength and the fruit that you ultimately want to produce. This serves as the possibility and the potential. But again, it doesn't just end here. It goes beyond into something that's cultivated. And cultivated is kind of this process here. You see, there's kind of this beginning formation, but arguably, to be cultivated is the most critical or the most important. And what I would say about this is that this is where intimacy is developed and trust is multiplied. Now, I'll use a real-world example of horticulture and use, you like that word, right? That was a Jeopardy word right there. That was a big word. But I'll use the process of growing a vine to explain what I mean. You see, because when the shoot or when the stalk or the trunk breaks ground, this is where the relationship begins between the vintner and his vine. You see, because a vine on its own cannot produce fruit, at least not the quality of fruit that you desire, that you hope for. It needs support, it needs care, it needs like hand kind of, maneuvering and placement. And so when this shoot breaks the ground and begins to grow, this is when it can actually be cultivated. And with every season, fall, winter, spring, summer, the vintner has certain responsibilities and certain tasks, certain jobs that he has to do or she has to do in order to care for this stalk, in order to grow it into the type of vine that is producing a grape or producing a fruit that is worthy of being sold or used or consumed. And so this vintner takes this vine and attends to it. He cares for it. She develops it. She strengthens it. She reinforces it where it needs reinforcement. She positions it where it's likely to receive the most sun or the most moisture or the most nutrients. She's, of course, placed it in the ground where it can grow. But this process, in wine specifically, from ground to production, is typically 7 years. 7 years of care, 7 years of intricacy, 7 years of development, 7 years of cultivation, of a vintner doing everything possible to ensure that this vine produces top quality fruit. And in spirituality and in faith with Jesus, this is where the magic happens. It may or may not take 7 years. It may or may not take 7 months. Who knows how long the process takes, not nearly as defined. But this process, when faith begins to grow, when trust begins to kind of shoot out of the ground, is where Jesus can nurture you, is where Jesus can strengthen you, is where Jesus can speak hope into your dreams and beliefs and also comfort into your fears and worries. This process is the most intricate and most delicate process, but my fear is that there are many believers and Christians who stop at being planted, who stop at being rooted, and never get the benefit or the fruit of being cultivated. Because it's in this spot that requires a little bit of work. It's in this spot that requires the faith. It's in this spot where you have to endure the difficulties of the seasons of life. And many of us sell ourselves short. We quit because it's difficult. We stop because we don't know the way. We kind of sell it out and say, well, it must not be worth it. Or I can't trust him, so I'm not going to move forward. And you say, no, don't you understand? This is the spot where trust is developed. It's in this process that you produce the fruit of unshakable. It's in this process that you produce the fruit of being assured. It's in this process that you produce the fruit of being at peace, no matter what your circumstances are. So don't stop down here and don't stop as the roots spread out, but allow yourself to grow in me. This is where trust is developed, and this is where trust is harbored, and this is where strengthening takes place so that Jesus says, so that you can live into what Jesus says about being unshakable. And the thing about this process is that everyone in this room is somewhere here. In fact, you may not even be on here because you've not yet been planted. But every person is represented in one of these phases. The question is, where are you? The question is, where is your life? What is it going to take for you to move into this planted phase? Surrender, yielding, thoughts or worries or fears of like, well, what is that person going to say or wonder or think about me if I give my life to Jesus? What is that family member going to believe about me? What will they say? Will I have turned my back on someone? Will they feel like I violated them or I did something so stupid? But me being planted, it's no different. Because the fear here is, well, are people going to think that I'm a Jesus freak? Are they going to think that I'm one of those crazy people? And so they get worried and they get consumed. And so, well, I just kind of do the minimum, check that box, get out of jail free card, get that eternity in heaven type of thing. But I don't know how deep I want to go with this thing. And in the rooted, you're like, well, I'm good enough. I know what I should do. I know what I shouldn't do. I'm a good person. That's kind of the basis for it, right? Like, I'm a good person. That's how we objectify, or that's how we kind of, justify, I should say, this phase of life. But then we wonder when the illness hits and the cancer strikes, why is my life spinning out of control? When the marriage isn't working out the way you thought, when the relationship isn't as good as it could have been. And you wonder, well, where's Jesus in the midst of all of this? And Jesus saying, look, I was waiting for you. I've been watering, I've been planting, I've been sowing, I've been encouraging, I've been inviting, I've been kind of bringing you into this, but you've not yet wanted to go there with me. But if you do, if you can move yourself to this phase, if you can walk the journey, if you can say, you know what, yes, Jesus is my Lord, and yes, I'm going to dig my roots in him, and yes, my life is going to be congruent with who he is and what he desires, and then I'm going to let the journey of life kind of lead me through this process of developing trust, what you'll experience and what you'll find is that your life will be measured by this, not this. Wow. That when others look to you, they'll say, yeah, that's the type of person I see. And that's the type of person I want to be. Several weeks ago, I was in a conversation with two friends. And there was an incident about a year ago now that took place where I reached out to a few people and had requested prayer for something. I was just like literally physically ill, kind of exasperated, and felt like just ridiculous kind of pain that I was in. And so I reached out to a handful of people and asked for prayer. And so we were in this conversation a few weeks ago and with these two friends, and one of them said, yeah, that was the only time I've ever seen Ricky in need or asked for help. And at first I thought to myself, I was like, well, that's probably not good. Am I faking something? Am I trying to pretend that I'm better? Or because over the last year, I've definitely needed help. And over the last year, I've definitely not felt strong. And over the last year, I've had moments of vulnerability and moments of fear and moments of weakness and moments of peril and moments of uncertainty. And over the last year, it's not that I've not needed someone to pray for me or someone to ask how I'm doing. And so, in all honesty, I took that for the next 2 days and just started to pray. It's like, God, am I trying to be kind of overconfident or project something that's not true? And God started to speak and he said, Ricky, this is what you have. So in those moments, to everyone else, you appear steadfast. To everyone else, you appear strong. To everyone else, you appear assured. You appear unshakable. You appear at peace because that's what I've done in your life. That's what I've cultivated. And this is the fruit that is being produced. And over this last year, it's been on display. And so others see you don't have a need, but really what they see is this fruit taking place here. Yes, you have needs, but it's not spinning your life out of control. Yes, you have fears, but it's not making you steady or falling down. Yes, you have worries, but you feel assured and confident that I'm going to come through for you. This is the fruit of what a relationship with Jesus and trusting in him can produce in my life. And Ricky, I'm putting it on display so that others can see that if he has it, I can have it. And if I have it, you can have it. And like Jesus said, it begins with trusting him. This is what it means to be unshakable. And I want for each of you to experience it. I want for each of you to become it. It just requires that we agree to the terms and conditions of trusting Jesus.